Cora Whitfield was standing in the hallway of her parents' house in Greenville, South Carolina, on a Sunday evening in September, standing 6 feet from the kitchen door, which was not fully closed, which was why she could hear her father say to her mother, "We give it 6 months. She'll come around once she sees it doesn't work," when she made a decision. She did not make it loudly. She did not make it with drama, or tears, or a confrontation she would need to manage afterward. She made it the way she made most important decisions, which was quietly and completely, and with the particular finality of someone who has just heard a thing that cannot be unheard and has chosen immediately what it means for everything that comes next. She went back to the living room. She sat down next to Marcus, her fiancé, who was sitting on the couch with a football game on, completely unaware that 6 feet and 1 kitchen door had just determined the rest of their lives. She took his hand. He looked at her. He said, "You okay?" She said, "Perfect." She was not performing this. She meant it precisely. She was perfect. She had just heard the most clarifying thing she would ever hear in her life. And clarity, even when it costs something, is a form of perfection. When Steve Harvey heard this story on the Family Feud stage 13 months later, heard the hallway, the kitchen door, the 6 months, and what Cora had done in the 13 months since, he walked to the edge of the stage, sat down on the floor with his legs dangling, and said, "Tell me everything." What Cora told him, all of it, including the last part, which nobody in the studio was prepared for, was seen by 296 million people and made a woman standing in a hallway the most discussed image in the history of the show. It was a Friday afternoon in October, 13 months after the hallway, when the Whitfield Reeves family walked onto the Family Feud stage in Atlanta. Cora, 29, had the compact, certain energy of a woman who knows exactly who she is because she has been tested on it and passed. Marcus, 31. Her husband now. They had married 7 months after the hallway, the timeline unchanged, her parents not in attendance, had the steady, warm ease of a man who loves his wife without reservation and is aware every day of how fortunate he is in this. Cora's best friend from college, Simone, Marcus's brother Darius, and Darius's wife, Ketsia, completed the team. Steve came out, and the first thing he noticed was the way Cora and Marcus stood at the podium, not touching, not performing, just present beside each other, in the easy, unremarkable way of people who have built something solid. He said, "How long have you been married?" Cora said, 13 months. He said, "How long did you know before that?" She said, 3 years. He said, "And?" She said, "And it's the only decision I've never second-guessed." He said, "I want that story." She said, "I'll give you all of it." Simone, in the family section, had her arms crossed and her chin up, which was how Simone watched things she was proud of, with the contained intensity of a woman who had been present for every version of the last 13 months and was prepared to say, loudly and to anyone who asked, that Cora Whitfield had handled every bit of it correctly. She had been the first person Cora had called after the hallway. She had picked up the phone at 11:30 on a Sunday evening, and Cora had said, "I heard them." Simone had said, "All of it?" Cora had said, "Enough." Simone had said, "What are you going to do?" Cora had said, "Marry him, the way we planned, and tell my parents afterward." Simone had said, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how decided are you?" Cora had said, "Not on the scale." Simone had said, "Okay." She had said, "I'll be your maid of honor." Cora had said, "I know." She had said, "Good night." She had ended the call. She had gone to sleep. Nobody in that studio knew about the second thing Cora had done yet, the thing that was not the wedding, that was different from the wedding, that was quieter and larger and had taken 13 months. But that wasn't even the part that would make Steve Harvey sit down on the floor of his stage. Cora had been engaged to Marcus for 4 months when the hallway happened. The engagement had not been a surprise to her parents, Robert and Patricia Whitfield, in the practical sense. They had known Marcus for 2 years. They had been cordial. They had been, as Cora had recognized with the retrospective clarity of someone who has heard a kitchen door conversation, the specific kind of cordial that is performed for the benefit of someone who is watching and doesn't extend into the spaces where no one is watching. She had seen the cordial. She had hoped it was real. She had been in the hallway when she found out. The plan her father had described to her mother was specific. They would not object openly. They would not create a scene. They would attend the engagement party. There was an engagement party planned for October, 3 weeks away. And they would be warm, and then, over the following months, they would raise practical concerns. Financial stability. Geographic distance. Cultural differences. They would raise them gently, one at a time, with a patient accumulation of someone who is not objecting, but merely questioning. And they believed, Robert had said this, 6 feet from his daughter through a not fully closed door, that Cora would eventually see what they saw and come to her own conclusion. She'll come around, he had said. She always does. Patricia had said, Robert, she's stubborn. He had said, she's ours. Give it 6 months. Cora had gone back to the living room. She had taken Marcus's hand. She had said, perfect, and had meant it. Because the hallway had just given her the information she needed to make every subsequent decision with complete clarity and without the uncertainty she had been carrying for 4 months about whether her parents' warmth was real. She had called her mother Monday morning. She had said, Mom, I need you and Dad to know something. Marcus and I have set our wedding date. It's April 14th. We'd love for you to be there. I need to know if you will be. Patricia had said, Cora, we need some time to. Cora had said, I understand. The date is April 14th. I'd love for you to be there. She had said nothing about the hallway. She had not needed to. She had ended the call. She had called the venue and confirmed the April date. She had sent her parents a formal invitation 3 weeks later, addressed to both of them, with a note that said, I love you. I hope you'll come. The note had not referenced the kitchen, or the 6 months, or the conversation she had heard. It had not needed to. Her parents did not attend the wedding. They sent a gift, a kitchen appliance, without a card. Cora had received it. She had sent a thank you note. She had continued being their daughter in all the ways that mattered and that she controlled. Birthday calls, holiday visits when Marcus was traveling for work. The occasional Sunday dinner with the specific, bounded cordiality of someone who loves a person and has decided on the terms of engagement. She had not told Marcus about the kitchen door. She had told him only that her parents had not been ready and that she was managing the relationship at her own pace. He had said, I don't need them to be there. She had said, I know. But I do. He had said, okay. He had not asked what that meant. He trusted her with it. The thing she had done over the 13 months, the quiet, large thing, was this. She had gone to therapy, not because the hallway had broken her. It had not. Because the hallway had clarified something that she had been carrying for years about being the daughter of people who loved her and could not see Marcus, and she had decided that she was going to understand that fully and not carry it in the place where it would damage her marriage. She had gone every week. She had spent 13 months in a Tuesday afternoon session with a therapist named Dr. Karen Webb, working through the specific archaeology of being raised to believe you are loved unconditionally and discovering the condition. She had not told her parents she was in therapy. She had not told Marcus she had told Simone. Simone had said, "Good." She had said nothing else. 13 months after the hallway, Cora had arrived at a place she could only describe as clear. She was not over it. She was not reconciled with it. She was clear. She knew exactly what she had heard and what it had cost, and what she had chosen instead. And she had chosen it with full information and no illusions and no second column. She had her husband. She had Simone. She had Dr. Webb. She had 13 months of Tuesday afternoons. She had a kitchen appliance from her parents, and a thank you note she had sent without hesitation, and a door that she had left open at a specific width that was manageable and honest. She had come to Atlanta to be somewhere that felt like a prize. She had also come to say the true thing in a room big enough to hold it. Steve Harvey would later say that Cora Whitfield's perfect was the most complete word he had ever heard used in a hallway. The game was midway through round 2. A question came: name something you might overhear that changes everything. Cora hit the buzzer. She said, "A-plan." The board flipped. Number 2 answer. The audience applauded. Steve said, "That answer has a story." She said, 6 feet from a kitchen door. He said, "Tell me." She told it. The hallway, the 6 months, the engagement party she had never canceled, the April 14th date, the invitation with the note, the wedding without them, the kitchen appliance, the 13 months of Tuesday afternoons, the clear. She said, "I want people to know that I didn't leave. I didn't confront them. I didn't make them choose. I got married, and I stayed their daughter, and I went to therapy for 13 months, and I got clear." She stopped. She said, "They're still my parents. I still call on birthdays. And I'm still married to Marcus. Both of those things are true at the same time." She stopped again. She said, "I heard my father say she'll come around. I came around, just not the way he meant." The studio fell completely silent. Not the usual game show pause, a different kind of silence entirely. Steve Harvey walked to the edge of the stage. He sat down on the floor, legs dangling. He looked at Cora. He said, "Tell me everything." She said, "I just told you." He said, "Tell me the part you almost didn't." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "The hardest part wasn't the wedding. The hardest part was calling my mother on her birthday last March and singing happy birthday and meaning it." The audience broke, not into applause, but into the specific sound of 300 people exhaling something that had been held. Steve sat on the floor of his stage and looked at Cora Whitfield and said, "I need a minute." He sat there for it. When he stood up, he said, "No game. Right now." This has never happened, a woman coming onto this stage and telling me that the hardest part was singing happy birthday and meaning it. This has never happened. He said, "Let me tell you something. When I was sleeping in my Ford Tempo, the hardest thing wasn't the cold. It was calling people who'd given up on me and not letting them hear that I hadn't given up on them. Because I decided that I was not going to become the version of myself that they decided I was." Cora Whitfield stood in a hallway and heard a plan and decided she was not going to become the version of herself her parents had decided she was. She married Marcus on April 14th, and she sang happy birthday, and she kept the door open at the exact width that was honest. He said, looking at her directly, "Mama, are you choosing me today?" He was not asking Cora. He was voicing the question he believed she had been asking herself for 13 months. She said, "Every day." He said, "Good. Because you always should." He wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and called his business manager on the stage of Family Feud. He asked for 2 things: a full scholarship for further professional development for Dr. Karen Webb's therapy practice. Because 13 months of Tuesday afternoons with Cora Whitfield is the most important clinical work done in the state of South Carolina this year, and a contribution to the Family Institute of the Carolinas, designated for low-income access to individual therapy for adults navigating family estrangement related to interracial relationships. He ended the call. He announced both families, the Whitfield Reeveses and the competing family, the Colemans from Columbia, were leaving with the full $20,000. The Coleman family crossed the stage. Their mother, a woman named Grace who was 64, went straight to Marcus and said, "She chose you every day." "You know that?" Marcus said, "I do." Grace said, "Good. Don't forget it." He said, "I won't." The episode aired 7 weeks later. 296 million views. The hashtag #SheComesAround trended in 21 countries for 11 days, adopted specifically by people who had made difficult choices about their own families and wanted a phrase for the particular kind of coming around that means choosing yourself rather than collapsing into someone else's plan. 3 family therapy organizations cited the episode in public statements about the clinical value of individual therapy in family estrangement cases. 3 months after the taping, Cora's parents came to dinner. Not at her parents' house, at hers and Marcus's. It was the first time they had been inside the house. Patricia had brought a dessert. Robert had shaken Marcus's hand at the door. It had been a quiet, careful evening. No one had mentioned the hallway. No one had mentioned the 6 months. Cora had made dinner. Marcus had talked about his work. Robert had asked a question about Marcus's industry that was a real question. Not a preamble to a point, but a question seeking information, and Marcus had answered it for 12 minutes, and Robert had listened. Patricia had helped clear the table. When they left, Patricia had hugged Cora at the door and said, "It's a good house." Cora had said, "Thank you for coming." Patricia had said, "We should have come sooner." Cora had said, "You came." She had meant it as a complete sentence. Patricia had understood it that way. A year after the taping, Dr. Karen Webb received the Professional Development Scholarship. She used it to expand her practice's capacity for low-income clients by 4 slots per week. She sent Cora a note. It said, "Thank you for 13 Tuesday afternoons and for telling the world." Cora read it. She put it on her desk. She called Dr. Webb, she said. It wasn't 13, it was closer to 50. "Doctor," Webb said, "I know, I was being modest." Cora said, "Don't be." Today, the Chosen Foundation, named for the choice Cora made every day for 13 months, provides subsidized individual therapy access and family estrangement support for adults navigating interracial relationship rejection within family systems. Its motto, taken from what Cora said backstage to Steve when he asked her what she most wanted other people in her situation to know, is, "You don't have to confront it. You have to be clear about it. Those are different things." The foundation has served 1,680 people across 14 states and maintains a network of 42 therapists offering reduced-rate estrangement-specific counseling. Have you ever heard something you couldn't unhear and chosen to stay anyway? Have you ever kept a door open at the exact width that was honest? Share your story in the comments. If Cora's 13 months of Tuesday afternoons moved you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to know that you can love someone and still choose yourself. And ring that notification bell for more stories about what it costs to stay clear.